welcome everyone. And this morning we're at the stories of Joseph and his brothers, Vayeshev. And it's going to be our last session before a 2-week break. And then we'll begin again, or 3-week break, sorry, because I arrive Wednesday night late.
What chapter is that, by the way?
So that's, let's see,
Vayeshev
37, chapter 37. And what I thought we could focus on today, we'll focus on the beginning of the Parsha. Since we've been studying all these weeks, it's really interesting to look at it in light of the other family stuff that's been going on in this family.
Yeah.
This is a complicated family, and it's been going on generation to generation. So how do we look at it? Instead of sometimes when you read a portion, you read it on Shabbat or wherever, and you look at it isolated. But I think it's so much more interesting to think about it, and in terms of the parents and grandparents and Joseph's great grandparents, and then to start talking about what is the Torah trying to reveal to us with all of these generational issues and conflicts and tensions and all of that. Okay, so let's begin. We're going to wait a second. Getting okay. So Alan, would you please begin reading for us Vayeshev?
Chapter 37.
37. Yep.
And Yaakov dwelt in the land in which his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Yaakov. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought to his father their evil report. Now Yisrael loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a coat with long sleeves. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said to them, "Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood around about and bowed down to my sheaf." And his brethren said to him, "Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us?" And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream and told it to his brethren and said, "Behold, I have again dreamed a dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me." And he told it to his father and to his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brothers indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. And his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Yisrael said to Joseph, "Do not thy brothers feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." And he said to him, "Go, I pray thee, see whether it will be well with thy brothers and well with the flocks, and bring me word again." So he went him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, "What seekest thou?" And he said, I seek my brothers. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, they are departed from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Daran. And Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Daran.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop there. So I switched the translation that we've been using from the new JPS to the Koran, which has a few little strange things here and there where they're interpreting the text rabbinically, but overall it's following the Hebrew more closely. I think the more interesting translation. Any thoughts? Anything come up here about the story? Just initial thoughts come up from reading the story of the beginnings of Joseph and his brothers.
Something immediately hit me,
Mhm.
and that is Yaakov gave Joseph a coat with long sleeves, not a coat of many colors. And I thought, could the translations be so different, or how did we get the coat of many colors? Because coat of many sleeves has a very different feel to it.
Well, there's a disagreement. Nobody really knows what the pasim really means. Some say that it's long. This is where it's a bit of an interpretation, but some feel that the coat is long, not long sleeves, but long. It reaches to the ground. Others say that it's to do with the quality of the weaving, and others still. I'm not sure that there's any of the traditional commentators that say it was multicolored. But here we can look at what Rashi says. A term of raiment, here we go, a fine wool.
Fine linen and blue.
Yeah, but it's interpreted midrashically that it's right, the letters of the word are for Potiphar, the merchants, the Ishmaelites, and the Midianites. So it's referring to all of his misdeeds are going to come out of this coat, but they just a word that we don't really know what it means. That's just the reality. But anyone else? Any other thoughts? Why do his brothers hate Joseph?
He's a dreamer. He's a dreamer, and he is, so in that respect, he's like his father, who's also a dreamer, but he's also the baby of the family, and he's Rachel's son, right? And how long did Yaakov work to be able to marry Rachel? So to have a son by that woman that he's been working for and laboring toward for what, 20 years now? That's a BFD. So they're jealous of him because he's daddy's favorite. But I think they're also jealous of him because he is a dreamer. I mean, dreams, and these dreams that he's having, they're not like they're not like Jacob's dreams. Jacob's dreams were he was visited by heavenly creatures, right? Divine creatures who are showing him a ladder or wrestling with him or saying, return home or whatever, right? These dreams are more metaphorical, right? These dreams are more open to interpretation. They're not involving a divine being. They're involving inanimate objects that become animated. So they're fantastical. They're much more fantastical, which means when he tells them, he sounds crazy. And he's indulged for these dreams too, right? I mean, people take his dreams seriously.
Jacob doesn't tell it. Go ahead, Phil.
Oh, I remember when as a child thinking that he was a spoiled kid, and that's not inconsistent, I think, really, with what Nancy's saying. And I think and I still think that. There's a certain brattiness that is in the story. It's really in the story before you get to the question of the dreams or themselves even. And that's why I wanted to ask a question about, and I knew it was a different translation, but I didn't know where it came from. because it has an oddly unliteral thing, it seemed to me. It says in verse 2, I guess, that it says he brought to his father their evil report. I think the usual translation, and literally the report, the report of them. That is, he brought an evil report about them. In other words, he was a tattletale.
Tattling tale, yeah.
Yes, it was.
Is that not a more natural? I'm sure they have a good reason for this one, but I don't know what it is.
It's a bit of the English. I agree. When we were going through it, the English is a bit awkward there somehow, because you're unsure when you read this translation whose evil report. But he's bringing what they were doing, what they were to their father. But the word is a little strange. It's dibatam, right? It's not their words. It's their diba. It's not their divarim. So it is a report. But it is. English is a little awkward there. But it's obviously he's tattertailing on them. That's definitely what he's doing. Yeah. Which is a few weeks ago, I had some Israeli friends from Israel over, family friends, and they were talking about their children. One of their children is a ganenet, a preschool teacher in Canada, and she teaches the kids, the Israeli code of honor among kids is you never tattletale to your parents about don't tattletale to your parents about what your siblings are doing. That's a no. But anyhow, Joseph is taking a risk, tattertailing on his older siblings. Definitely. He's spoiled because of the coat and because he's favored by his father. It's very easy to get that image just from the. How does he compare to Jacob, the man who dwelt in tents? Does he come across in a similar way?
In a way, yes, because he is definitely not the oldest, right? And Jacob and Esau kind of vied for their father's attention. Esau was Isaac's favorite. But what I'm saying is this is a younger son. This is not the firstborn. This is a younger son. And yet again, we're reading a story about a younger son who winds up triumphing over his older sibling or siblings.
Yes. It's interesting where that is such a common trope. But what about why is Jacob favoring again? What happened to him? Why is he continuing this destructive way of being with one's children that he himself experienced with his parents? I think, as you said, the whole story of it all goes back to Rachel and Leah, right? And
doesn't it? Yeah.
I mean, he
go ahead.
He loved Rachel. I think it was very interesting what you said about God being in Jacob's dreams and not in Joseph's dreams. I mean, Jacob's dreams, because God isn't them, he doesn't tell them to anyone, have a very different quality than these dreams. The fact that he immediately goes and tells, how does that make him sound?
Like a braggart.
Like a braggart.
Or that he actually could have these dreams and they could come true.
A braggart, either a braggart or foolish, perhaps. you would think that he would have a little bit more sense than to tell his old strong brothers, but maybe he felt
Right?
protected. I mean, I spoke about this in Minyan this morning, but I find so interesting. The sentence "V'lo yachlu dabro leshalom," and they could not speak peaceably to him. They were unable to. Their hate overpowered them. But do you blame them?
Not at all. Who is this young upstart, right? He doesn't know us, the older brothers and sister, right? Because there's a sister. And he missed a lot, right? Because he's Rachel's child, and Isaac didn't marry Rachel for what, 20 years? He had to work, at least 15.
14
years. Yeah, he had to work a long time. And by then he'd already sired children with Leah and Bilhah and
Zilpah.
Zophah, yes, the other handmaiden. So Rachel only had 2 children, so he's already got 10 children by the time that Joseph is born. So Joseph he's got to make a name for himself in this mass of 11 children, right? And plus his mother is Rachel, so I wonder if there isn't some. Well, I can only speculate because it's not in the text.
I mean, we say it, but I'm not sure if we think about it enough. It's what we call these days a blended family, right? It's children from different mothers, all together in the same household, and then that creates, all kinds of that can create, at least in this case, it does all kinds of. I mean, I guess Esau and Jacob have the same parents, but they have the same issues. But here maybe it's even more deeply entrenched, because carrying through the issues that arose to the blended family in the first place. And I mean, one sees it, one can see it even in our day in families like this, that there's jealousies and rivalries and sense of who's getting the most love, and of feeling abandoned, and it's a kind of tragic situation.
But what also makes this family unique is that 2 of the wives are sisters, which means their children are their siblings. They're siblings, but they're also first cousins, right?
Yes.
I mean, that in itself is more than a little confusing, and I'm sure fed some sort of resentments and jealousies.
I think that's true. I just wanted to make one little, I think it's a correction. Correct me if I'm wrong with this. It's true about, I think, the delay in having children with Rachel, but it wasn't strictly a matter of having to wait all those years, because he married her, I think, the next week, and he just had to work all that time. He
That's
did
true.
his service for her.
That's true.
Although you get the impression as a
That's true.
child that it was a different way.
But,
So he didn't have to
but
wait
the
that long.
years- But she's barren. She's barren for a number of years also.
I'm sorry.
Rachel is barren for a number of years.
While her sister's having all the children.
Rachel
That's
is barren.
Right. So
We can go back. Let's go back and read the section, because I think it really brings it. Let's see.
It's Dina.
Here you are.
This is Dina. Not the most
Which in
uplifting.
itself is a very strange story that's been dropped in the middle of this.
Very primal story.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're almost there. Chapter 30, I think, is where it's. Okay. Okay. Let's read some of this. I think we can't read what we're reading now without seeing some of this. Okay. Okay.
Here it is.
Fill her
Okay, here
week.
it is. Okay. Someone read for us, beginning here. Lavan said.
And Laban said, it must not be done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet another 7 years. And Yaakov did so and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel, his daughter, Bilhah, his maid, to be her handmaid. And he went in also to Rachel, and moreover, he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet another 7 years. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, surely the Lord has looked upon my affliction. Now, therefore, my husband will love me. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, because the Lord has heard that I was hated, he has therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Shimon. And she conceived again a third time, bore a son and said, now this time my husband will be joined to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. And therefore was his name called Levi. And she conceived again as the 4th son and bore a son. And she said, now I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Yehudah, and she left off bearing. Going on.
A little bit, yeah.
And when Rachel saw that she bore Yaakov no children, Rachel envied her sister and said, give me children or else I die. And Yaakov's anger burned against Rachel, and he said, am I in the place of God, who has withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? And she said, behold, my maid Bilhah, go into her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. And she gave him Bilhah, her handmaiden, to wife, and Yaakov went into her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Yaakov a son. And Rachel said, God has judged me, and has also heard my voice, and has given me a son, but it's actually Bilhah's son. Therefore she called his name Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again and bore Yaakov a second son. And Rachel, who's naming her handmaiden's son, said, with great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister. And I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali. And when Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave Zilpah to Yaakov to wife. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bore Yaakov a son. And Leah said, fortune comes, and she called his name Gad. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bore Yaakov a second son. And Leah said, happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher. And Reuben went in the days of the wheat harvest and found the mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, of my son's mandrakes. And she said to her, isn't it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? And would thou take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for my son's mandrakes. And Yaakov came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, thou must come in to me, for indeed I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes. And he laid with her that night. And God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bore Yaakov a 5th son. Those are some powerful mandrakes. And Leah said, God has given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband. And she called his name Yissachar. And Leah conceived again and bore Yaakov a 6th son. And Leah said, God has endowed me with a good diary. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun. Afterwards, she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. And then God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son. And said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Yosef and said, the Lord shall add to me another son.
Okay.
And it can't, shall I go on?
I'm just gonna go forward a little bit because
So it's
so
got what, 11 sons and a daughter at this point.
we're gonna get the final one. That we're gonna go to the death of Rachel because she's let's see. After
Isn't it after the Esau incident where
it's after the story of Dinah.
yeah.
Let's see.
And there it
There we
is,
go.
19. Yeah, 18, 19.
As they journeyed, and do you mind reading on, Nancy?
Okay, and they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrat. And Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass when she was in hard labor that the midwife said to her, fear not, thou shalt have this son also. And it came to pass, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Binyamin. And Rachel died and was buried in the way to Ephrat, which is Bethlehem. And Yaakov set a pillar upon her grave, and that is the pillar of Rachel's grave to this day. And Yisrael journeyed and pitched his tent beyond the tower of Eder.
Okay.
And it came to pass.
So we can stop there.
Yeah.
But I think we see how complicated this family situation is, and that these sons are all coming into the picture with is just not simple, not a simple situation. And the not only was Rachel the one that Jacob loved, but she also died. So one of the comments, and we'll get to the commentaries in a second, but it says that Joseph was the son of his old age. But who was really the son of his old age?
Looks like Benjamin.
Benjamin, right? Benjamin is the son of his old age. And why did he favor Joseph and not Benjamin?
Because Benjamin killed his wife. And I'm sure there's got to be some sort of resentment for that, right? If you hadn't been born, Rachel would still be with me, or something like that. I mean, I know it's irrational, but that happens.
I mean, it's a very complicated situation for Jacob to be in all of this, having all of this situation of these two sisters that he ended up marrying, and they take on this wrestling of siblings, right? That Jacob and Esau themselves had.
Joseph doesn't have a mother to protect him. All the other brothers and sisters, they have a mother to protect them against, the other siblings. Like Rebecca protected Jacob against Esau. Jacob doesn't have a protector in this family, and his father is losing his eyesight and is walking with a limp and is old now. So, and he's the youngest. He's the youngest, and he has no advocate in the family for him because his mother is dead. So perhaps that could be contributing to the hard feelings that his siblings have for him.
Well, there's also that Jacob missed Rachel, and maybe he saw in his sons from Rachel, some of their mother, and it's hard to control 12 boys. Try to control 12 boys. Not going to be such an easy thing to do, and he probably just felt he had to take extra good care of Joseph, knowing how long Rachel had waited for him. But also, there's an expression that we find of Joseph, and he'll go forward in the Parsha, to when he's in Egypt and sold. Joseph is, he gets attacked by his brothers, he gets sold. to Potiphar, the minister of Egypt, and then he rises in the household of Potiphar, and he becomes very successful. The Lord, right? The Lord was with Yosef, and he was a successful man. He was in the house of Mitzrayim, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did prosper in his hand. And Yosef found favor in his sight and served him, and he made him overseer over his house and all that he put into his hand. And it came to pass that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Mizraim's house for Yosef's sake, Mitzrayim's house. So what is the house of the Mitzrayim? That's what that is. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Yosef's hands, right? He becomes very prominent, very smart, obviously. And he knew not what he had, save the bread which he had. And Yosef was a good-looking lad. Vehi Yosef yefei toar v'yefei mar'eh, and well-favored. Some people say you could interpret that as he was well-shaped and handsome, not sure what well-favored means. But there's only one other person who has the exact same description.
David.
Rachel, his mother Rachel.
Oh, okay.
If you go back to Genesis, I believe, I want to confirm that, but I believe it. Let's see, if we go to 29, and behold, Rachel, his daughter, comes with the sheep, right? Let's see. Yaakov kissed her, blah, blah, blah. Here we go. And Lavan had $2. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, and Rachel was beautiful and well-favored, right? She was beautiful and well-favored. So we see Joseph is very much like his mother, right? He looks like his mother. He's handsome and well-favored. So let's just go back. And so it's hard not to understand Jacob, what he's doing. At the same time, how destructive it is. And also the brothers, they feel they're the sons of, their mother is not loved by their father. How hard can that be?
Yeah.
That's a really very difficult situation to be in. And then the whole family dynamic is very, very hard. And as we'll see in the commentators, maybe they can forgive Joseph for being a bratty young brother who is reporting on tattletaling. I mean, that's not the end of the world. But to see their father favor him in that way, that must be heartbreaking for them. That must be very, very hard. But maybe a big question is where is the spiritual center of all of this? Where is God in all of this?
That's a good question.
I mean, God is very present in the earlier part of looking over the rivalry between Rachel and Leah, and he seems to favor first Leah because she's unloved. I don't know if he makes Rachel barren, if she just happens to be barren, but then he feels also for Rachel, and he opens up Rachel's womb. So where is the divine's place in all this story?
Well, that sounds like Sarah and Isaac, right?
Mm-hmm. It usually goes back to that.
Very reminiscent.
Very close, isn't it? Yeah. There's Hagar and Sarah, right? And Sarah getting jealous of her handmaid.
But also it implies that that Joseph is somehow not just favored by Yaakov, but favored by God, right? Because he touches Leah's womb. The Lord opens Leah's womb in order for Joseph to be born. So there's
Rachel's womb.
Rachel.
Mhm.
Rachel's
Yeah.
womb. Yeah, right. So there's this divine intervention, right, in his
Beautiful.
conception.
He's a meant child somehow. Yeah.
That's really an interesting question, because you can see the story, and one attraction it has, I think, to modern readers, and it is that it very much can be read as operating on a level of a natural story that doesn't require any a God intervening in the normal narrative of the story. And so when it says the Lord favored him and all that he had, the blessing of the Lord was upon him, that can be understood as a conventional way of saying he was fortunate without having to commit to some religious doctrine.
Divine intervention. Sure.
And later the story is shaped in a way that understanding of it could become harder to sustain, but because of the various outcomes. But here it's very much a human story, which is one thing that makes it affecting. Even and the dreams are not dreams, as I forget who mentioned this. The dreams are not dreams of a divine voice, but of his own of his own experience, yeah, or hope or metaphor.
And yet they become prophetic dreams, as we know the end of the
absolutely.
story. So
Right. And Jacob sees them that way.
Part that we see here, just striking me as we're talking, is we see God's place shift throughout all the stories of Genesis, right? God is with Abraham, God speaks directly to Abraham multiple times. Says Abraham really is very involved in Abraham's life and speaks to him and is revealed to him multiple times. And then Isaac, just a few times does God speak directly to him. To Jacob, we have his dreams, and there's maybe one place where God may speak to Jacob, but it's basically in dreams that God speaks to him directly. And then in Joseph, God doesn't speak to Joseph. Joseph just has prophetic dreams. So there is a sense of Joseph's story is a much more relatable. It's a little bit like almost the story of the Book of Esther. I mean, the Book of Esther even more so. God is not in it at all, yet God is everywhere because of all the coincidences. But God in this story it feels like a very human story. Right in the story, if we're going to compare it, story of Abraham and Hagar and Sarah, when Hagar tells Abraham, send Ishmael away, and Abraham says, no way, God appears to Abraham and says, listen to your wife, you must send him away. So there's direct divine intervention in that story, the way we're not feeling here. So let me read, if you're willing, Rashi. This is the very first. These are the generations or the progeny of Jacob.
These are the progeny of Jacob, and these are an account of the generations of Jacob. These are their settlements and the events that happened to them until they formed a permanent settlement. The first cause is found in the narrative, Joseph being 17 years old, etc. It was through this incident that it came about that they went down to Egypt. This is the real explanation of the text, and in it, each statement finds its proper setting. The Midrash, however, explains that by the words, these are the progeny of Jacob. What is the word there?
So the question is, it says these are the progeny of Jacob, and then it doesn't mention who the progeny are.
Yeah, but I didn't know what the Hebrew
Joseph was 17 years old, so it goes straight to talking about Joseph.
Right. So we didn't know what the progeny, the Hebrew word was for the progeny.
Toldot.
Oh, okay. So it could be. I can see what it could be. The generations.
These are the generations of Jacob,
yeah,
but then it doesn't mention the generations. Usually, when you have that, it mentions all the generations.
Yeah, I see. Okay. So he says the Midrash explains that by the words, these are the progeny of Jacob. Joseph, Scripture regards all of Jacob's sons as secondary to Joseph for several reasons. First, the whole purpose of Jacob in working for Laban was only for Rachel, Joseph's mother, and all his children were born only in consequence of this.
Mm.
Then again, Joseph's facial features bore a striking resemblance to those of Jacob. Further, whatever happened to Jacob happened to Joseph. The one was hated, the other was hated. In the case of the one, his brothers wished to kill him. So too, in the case of the other, his brethren wished to kill him. Many such similarities are pointed out in Genesis Rabbah. Another comment on this verse is Vaisha, and he abode. Jacob wished to live at ease. But this trouble in connection with Joseph suddenly came upon him. Oh, he just sat, he dwelt there and he was happy. But when the righteous wish to live at ease, the holy and blessed be, he says to them, are not the righteous satisfied with what is stored up for them in the world to come, that they wish to live at ease in this world too?
How do we know, though? How do they know?
Well, it's very pointed comment at the end there, but I think it adds a dimension which is true, which is Jacob he's gone through all of his troubles. He wants to just live peacefully, but kind of all the troubles catch up with him, with his family, what was sowed during all those years. And Jacob doesn't have an easy end of his life. None of his life is easy. You know, he goes and then he thinks Joseph is dead, and he has all those years of mourning Joseph, and he does not have an easy life. And so, you know, the rabbis need to address that, just as they need to address their own feeling of having a difficult life in exile and what is that about. And this is how they deal with it. What, you're satisfied? You should be satisfied. It's all going to be good once you pass away. You want also good life here.
That's very funny. I mean, I think it's deliberately funny. It's a Jewish joke, really.
It is a Jewish joke. It's you could see it's a. I mean, the rabbis. The rabbis have a lot of humor and anxiety around their fate of wondering, you know, about the exile, the destruction of the temple, their own sense of you know where they're taking Judaism, where God is doing to the Jewish people, and so that kind of Yiddish humor doesn't come from nowhere. It goes. The oys begin a long time before the oyves. So now we're going to get a little bit more into commentators on what they thought of all of this. This is also Rashi. Phil, do you mind reading and he being a lad?
Oh, I'm sorry. We're reading which?
And he being a lad. It's the
I don't see it here.
Do you see it there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Right. And he being a lad, his actions were childish. He dressed his hair, he touched up his eyes so that he should appear good looking.
The Midrash reading into the lines as we all are, but interesting. Go ahead. Their evil reports.
And then we have the evil report of them. Their evil. Whatever he saw wrong in his brothers, the sons of Leah, he reported to his father that they used to eat flesh cut from a living animal, that they treated the sons of the handmaids with contempt, calling them slaves, and that they were suspected of living in an immoral manner.
So we see how the rabbinic tradition tempers some of his, because the fact that they were speaking ill, you know, these are the sons of Leah speaking ill about the sons of Zilpah and Bilhah. So that's how they're interpreting it, means that they're trying to make Joseph not quite, I mean, it's still not a good thing to tattletale, but he is tattletaling on genuinely bad things they're doing. If you don't mind reading on, Phil, one more, Or Chaim, that's okay.
Or Chaim. Israel loved Joseph, etc. The Torah reported this here in order to provide the rationale for the brothers' hatred of their younger, that is, their little brother, Joseph. The reason the verse begins with the conjunctive letter,
Vav. Vav.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I just don't see it here. There's a Vav is right in front of the word in.
Sorry.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
Okay, I see now.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. The reason the verse begins with the conjunctive letter Vav in front of Israel, is to inform us that if the tale bearing would have been the only problem, the brothers could have coped with that. They would have argued with Joseph and convinced him that his suspicions were unfounded. It was the additional element of their father displaying distinct favoritism which poisoned the atmosphere between Joseph and his brothers. Not only did Jacob love Joseph better than all his other sons combined, because the language is ambiguous that way, but he even made a public display of this. Once this hatred of Joseph had become a factor in their mutual relations, nothing could correct the situation. There was no longer any point in the brothers speaking peacefully, i.e., trying to make peace with the talebearer, seeing he was so clearly their father's favorite. That's
Sounds like a real family.
Yes. Really hard situation. What were you about to say, Phil? You put yourself on mute. You're about to say something.
I think I have to talk to them. I'll shut up.
Okay. Someone else want to read for us? Chizkuni. Joseph reported negative reports about him.
Joseph reported negative reports about them. No wonder that they all began to hate him as a talebearer. The sons of Bilhah and Zilpah hated him as a talebearer, and his other brothers hated him because he was the favorite of their father. They were therefore afraid that in due course their father would appoint him as his firstborn. When the Torah writes in verse 4, they hated him, it refers to all of the brothers except Benjamin, who was only 10, 11 years old. Each group of brothers had a different reason for hating him. They were afraid that their father would treat Joseph as their grandfather Yitzhak had treated his son Esau, because of emotional attachment not based on objective considerations.
So interesting how all the family dynamics from the past come to bear. I mean, I think we see this in real families, how you pick up the ways of thinking of your parent, and you know the stories of your parents and their siblings, and it becomes so. And please continue, Sforno.
I just,
It's possible that the family dynamics have replaced the divine intervention. Somehow that family dynamics are the forces that move this, rather than the divinity himself.
Yeah. It's a question we have to ask ourselves, right? Because if this goes back to Jacob and Esau, right? That seems to be God is so present in that, right? From the moment that they're struggling with each other, Rebecca turns to God and says, what's this moving around in my stomach? What is going on here? And God says, the two brothers are wrestling, and the older will serve the younger. And from the moment there's a prophecy there. So, even we don't see God's hand. If we're following the Torah from all of that, we know God's hand is in this. And what is God doing with all of this? And what does that do for all of it? Of almost any story in the whole Torah, the story of Joseph, right? What's hanging over all of this? Actually, we're going to go back. Hanging over the whole story of Joseph is
Exodus. If there's no Joseph, there's no
Exactly.
Exodus. If there's no Exodus, there's no Sinai. If there's no Sinai, there's no Torah.
Yeah, exactly.
So God doesn't really have to put his hand in the thing if the thing is moving in the direction that the family dynamics and the earthly forces are taking it. So he only has to put his hand into it if to adjust what's happening with the earthly forces that are taking it in these more or less natural directions.
So you don't think God has any hand in all of this?
Well, I mean, that's just a way
Yeah.
of talking, but no, the hand is actually the earthly forces at that time. I assume God is a lazy person. So he's not about to do anything that's happening on its own. Why would he bother? So if something is happening on its own that he sort of organized in the background a long time ago, he can let it be until it starts to go astray.
So you're saying he's very mischievous.
Oh, for
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
for sure. Mischievous and lazy, same thing.
Well, There's a third quality you could perhaps add on to that is God loves, according to the Bible, loves to touch people by making physical events happen in the lives of the prophets, right?
Okay.
So the private Hosea, right? He marries a prostitute, and then God says, "This is like me. I've married Israel, a prostitute," right?
Mm,
Or the prophet Ezekiel spends half a year lying down on one side and the other half on the other side. So this is like my two, Joseph and Jacob. And he, through this living symbolism, the prophet is almost sacrificing their own life to become a living symbolism for future generations to learn from them. And not to take into another religion, but that religion comes out of our religion. And Christianity, the whole idea of Jesus on the cross, that's not so far from that idea, right? It's coming out of the Jewish idea of the prophet as a living symbolism for God's teaching in the world. So we're back to Abraham now, and this is God speaking to Abraham. This is called the covenant of the parts, one of the great moments in Abraham's life. Really, really, really interesting. Someone read for us.
And he said to him, take me a heifer 3 years old, and a goat 3 years old, and a ram 3 years old, and a turtle dove and a young pigeon. And he took to him all these and divided them in the midst and laid each half against the other. But the birds he divided not. And the eagle came down upon the carcasses, and Avram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Avram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said to Avram, know surely that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them. And they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve, I will judge. And afterwards shall they come out with great substance.
Wow.
And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, and thou shalt be buried in a good old age.
So this is the covenant of the parts, right? God literally cuts into the animals, right? Cutting a covenant, and makes a promise to Abraham about this dream. So within the internal world of the stories of the patriarchs and matriarchs, God's hand, they've got to get down to Egypt, right? And this is all part of what's happening.
The plan was there from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they come out, the notion that they're going to come out of Egypt with some sort of spoils. There's a commentary that I read a long time ago that Hitler was very interested in this and decided not to let the Jews out of Europe alive, because he felt that the divinity would give them all of the riches of Europe if they came out of Europe that way. So
wow, very interesting. Well, we know that he was very into occult, all kinds of things, and
well, he might have been reading the Torah too.
But for Hitler to think that he could somehow outwit God by exterminating an entire race of people and outwit God's plan is crazy.
a little crazy. So I'd like to get to the end now, which is the story of meeting this person, right? Who then points him on the way forward. So we have Rashi, and the man found him. This was the angel Gabriel, as it says in the man Ha'ish. And this is Gabriel, Midrash Tanchuma, about Daniel, from the book of Daniel. Ibn Ezra is more the rational, according to plain meaning of the text, a passerby found him. But it's such a moment, right? He's walking, and suddenly this random person meets him and tells him to go to his brother, right? This is what Ramban says about it. Someone read this comment.
And the man found him, and behold, he was straying in the field. The verse is stating that Joseph was straying from the road, not knowing where to go. and he entered a field, since he was looking for them in a place of pasture. Scripture mentions this at length in order to relate that many events befell him which could properly have caused him to return, but he endured everything patiently for the honor of his Father. It also informs us that the divine decree is true and man's industry is worthless. The Holy One, blessed be he sent him a guide without his knowledge in order to bring him into their hands. It is this that our rabbis intend when they said that these men, and the man found him, and the man asked him, and the man said, were angels. For these events did not occur without purpose, but rather to inform us that it is the counsel of the eternal that shall stand.
A very stark but powerful statement by Ramban. It also informs us that the divine decree is true and man's industry is worthless. So where is our free will in all of that? Maybe we'll talk about that.
Well, this is the same as Solomon that we read, the Ecclesiastes part.
Vanity of vanities.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or Calvin, before Calvin.
There's a sense that Joseph has no choice, right? He's being led down. Even God has planted these little places all over, even to make sure that Joseph gets to his brothers and is attacked by his brothers and rises and all of these things. And somehow we have to coexist with both of these ideas of the divine hand, and yet all of these human events, and of us having free will, and Joseph deciding to share his dreams, and of the brothers deciding to throw him in the pit and attack him, and of Jacob deciding not to do anything to protect his youngest son, and of Jacob deciding to favor his youngest son. And it's a very, very powerful dichotomy to hold in our minds and hearts. But somehow, even though the rabbis are reading into it more, because in the text it's just a man, there's no angel as far as we can tell. I mean, it is easy. The man who wrestled with him was also an Ish, so it's hard to know what the Torah is telling us about this person. But holding those two definitely seems to be, even if the rabbinic commentary is overstating it more, the Torah is playing both of those, both the divine hand working all of the different sides, taking the Jewish people down to Egypt so they can then come out of Egypt. And also, we all live in these situations and have choices to make. And even though these seem sometimes as there is no choice, could they have acted differently? And as I mentioned this morning, right, in this little passage that we read, the word shalom comes up 3 times. They were no longer able to speak shalom. And then Jacob says, go see to the shalom of your brothers, right? So the counterpoint for all of this jealousy and all of this conflict is shalom. And the big question is, how do you heal, which is also a very human story of all the book of Genesis, along with God's hand moving the Jewish people. How do you heal generational trauma and generational issues? I mean, this is going back generations of these issues, and these troubles keep coming back and plaguing this family. And how do you heal them? Joseph will eventually heal them to a great extent. I mean, they play up later on in the tribes and all of this, but Joseph puts in a big attempt to heal this generational trauma. And that's obviously looked upon as redemptive by the Torah. So we'll chew on that and see everyone after the break.